So walking through the little village of Issigeac, which is a medieval village in the region just near Bergerac in France. And one of the things that is just so typical in these little villages, especially in the morning, is if you walk past the bakery and there's the smell of baking bread, of sweet things, which will bring great surprise and enjoyment. And as you go past, your tummy rumbles in anticipation. But this morning I'm holding strong, holding my camera, and hopefully giving you something to enjoy as I walk through this little village. Now, last night there was actually a huge storm that came through this region, and I'm surprised there's not a little more damage, because it was windy for about 3 hours, so much so I'd actually thought that there might have been a tornado that touched down somewhere, but luckily it doesn't seem that that was the case. But look at some of these old buildings and the design and how different they are. You know, if you are in the UK and you look at some of the older medieval buildings, you see the use of woodwork on the outside. But what's unique here is that use of the stone and how it is used in a horizontal way with the wood. And then, of course, you have these little overhangs that come through, and the overhang of the roof, which goes over what is a little balcony, which in the summers is wonderful because it brings some relief from the hot summer sun, and you have a little shade that will then cool down your home as well. And here is one that is for sale. Beautiful little old stone home. You've got a garage. You've got the entrance to your home. It would be interesting to see how much something like this in a very well touristed village would go for, because this town of Issigeac has what is considered to be the best market in all of France on a Sunday morning. And unfortunately, I'm here on a Saturday, so there we go. But hopefully you're getting a sense of what this is like and how beautiful it is. I mean, it must be hell to try and do any work on any of these houses, because I would imagine that they have a lot of planning requirements to make sure that you're keeping the essential village character and the feel of it, but at the same time you have to have modern amenities and you have to have modern safety standards. But you can see a lot of the windows still have the wooden window sills, as through most of France. And these regions, you also have a lot of shutters. And over here is something, as I walk through, you'll see, which is very typical. People often talk about, the narrow streets in medieval times. And as I'm walking up to this particular little area, you can see how narrow that area is. And also, actually, if I turn the camera over here, and a lot of that was also heat control, because the shadow of one building would fall against the other, therefore keeping it cool and keeping the pedestrians who were walking up and down cool. So this particular building looks like there's maybe 5 foot apart, and then from the upper part about 4 foot apart. But I'm just going to focus again on some of the features here. Look at the ironwork on that door. Now, that's not necessarily medieval, but that's certainly older. And that kind of ironwork you don't see that much anymore. It's unfortunately the shadow is preventing you from seeing it. But also, if you look up in the windows, you will see some of that ironwork as well replicated. There we go. Pulling out again. Again, what is lovely is they've kept some of the character with older type street lights. It's very quiet here in the morning. I would imagine everyone's enjoying their cup of coffee and their pain au chocolat. Have already been down to the bakery or the pâtisserie or boulangerie, depending on which. So apparently the difference is the boulangerie is really just a baker, whereas a patisserie is somebody who works with pastries. So here you can see clearly what I was talking about with the buildings being very close together, because there's no reason for them to have built this close together other than for something like shade, because we're in an area in the countryside, so there's plenty of space. And actually, there is a real estate agency here, and I'm just looking in some of the windows. So some of the older properties, there's one there for 321,000. I wonder whether that is in the village. And then there's a chateau there for 787,000. Now, what's interesting about those chateaux is that you go inside and you imagine that many of them are like Versailles. Well, they're not necessarily, and they weren't that comfortable either. Stone floors throughout, a lot of wooden stairs. The wood, very beautiful, big, wide stairs, wide floorboards, but hell to heat. And, you know, you've got all those little towers and so on, but it doesn't necessarily make for a comfortable space. I suppose it's all how you furnish it in the end. But again, what I love is, you know, here you have a tattoo parlor, you also have your hairstylist, you've got your bar and hotel. So this little village, despite its age, is very much alive and well. And just kind of deciding which way to wander next. So boucherie, charcuterie is basically your butcher, and a charcuterie is a place where you can go and get your kind of dried meats or specialized meats like saucisson and hams and things like that. One of my favorite places. And again, just looking at the different styles, you can see that this building's obviously been fixed up. Where it has the orange plasterwork, that is new. And I suspect that some of that wood has been replaced as well, because you can see the marks on the wood. They're actually there to make it look like it's older wood, but I think it's been specially treated. Often they hit it with chains to get those kind of pock-marked, aged looks. But absolutely beautiful. Little restaurant over here, everything is closed. I've obviously hit a good time to be able to wander around and not be assaulted by too many tourists and too many locals. Give you an idea of what's on one of the local menus here. We are fairly close to the sea, so fish is something that you'll find a lot of, as is duck. And definitely just north of here, you get a lot of snails. This is a typical charcuterie board with your dried meats, your pâtés and egg and so on. And in this region, certainly duck and foie gras is a big favorite. Now, foie gras is actually the duck liver, and depending on where you are, you know, how they do that isn't necessarily the nicest thing for the duck itself, but all I can tell you is it is delicious. Dare I admit to having tried it. Here you have a little bridge, so I wonder whether this was a family, potentially two sisters who might have lived separately with their own families, and you know, wanted to be able to access each other. Now this feels very much more like we're going to a residential as opposed to a commercial part of the village. Let's see, which way will I go? Could do with some trimming. But you can see here, you can see the devastation from the storm last night. These are definitely down as a result of the wind. Have a little art studio. And yeah, so away from the dead center, you start to notice that things get a little more tired and are not as well maintained, but I would imagine it's very expensive to maintain parts of a village like this. Here you have another little square with the pump, the water pump. People sitting out, neighbours. This is so weird. I mean, you could really imagine people going back a couple of centuries living in these little narrow streets with their sewage running down the middle of the street. And of course, these beautiful little houses. And I will head back in. Hopefully that's given you a good sense of what this little town called Issigeac is like. And if you are ever near Bergerac or in that area, I would say definitely make a trip to come out here, because it really is very special and you really do get a feel of what it is like to be in a little medieval village.